Just when we thought the story of the Charlie Kirk assassination was finally clear, a new development has forced us to rethink everything. Reports are now pointing to the possibility that the real shooter wasn't Tyler Robinson at all, but a figure tied to an Antifa-linked subgroup, one with a reputation for militant extremism, and according to emerging accounts, this individual may still be on the run. For months, this theory lingered on the fringes, but today it's gaining momentum, backed by new whispers, new patterns, and growing belief that Robinson was never the whole story. If true, this changes everything we thought we knew about that September night. And here's where it gets even more explosive. The subgroup allegedly tied to this shooter isn't just any radical wing, it's one many claim specifically recruits and shelters transgender members, a detail that brings us right back to the mystery of Lance Twiggs and his sudden disappearance. Before we break this down, what it means, why the media won't touch it, and why it matters right now, make sure you're subscribed, hit the like button, and let me know in the comments what you believe. Is the real shooter still out there, or is Robinson just the fall guy in a far deeper plot? To understand why this new theory matters, we have to revisit what we were told from the very beginning. The official story was simple, maybe too simple. Tyler Robinson, a young man with a troubled past, walked into an event and assassinated Charlie Kirk. Within hours, his family pressured him to surrender. He was taken into custody, and the case seemed sealed. A lone wolf narrative. A clear-cut arrest. Then came the cracks. Neighbors noticed Robinson's partner Lance Twiggs had vanished almost instantly, his condo left lit up, his car abandoned, his mail piling high. Questions about whether Twiggs knew more than he admitted began swirling, and suddenly, the lone wolf version felt incomplete. At the same time, whispers started to surface online. People pointed out the gaps in the timeline, the inconsistencies in the evidence, and the possibility that Robinson hadn't acted entirely alone. Those whispers grew into a louder theory that Robinson may have been the face of the crime, but not the only hand on the trigger. And now, with new chatter about an Antifa-linked subgroup, those whispers are no longer background noise. They're shaping into a narrative that suggests the assassination was bigger, more coordinated, and far more dangerous than anyone first admitted. The first mentions of an Antifa connection surfaced quietly, scattered forum posts, small blogs, and whispers on alternative media channels. At first, it sounded like noise, but then, piece by piece, a pattern started to emerge. According to these accounts, Robinson had ties to a radical faction operating under the wider Antifa banner. Unlike the broader movement, this subgroup wasn't about protest, it was about escalation, militancy, targeted action. And what makes this wing stand out is its composition, a network largely formed around transgender members who allegedly found both community and cover within it. Now, this isn't speculation living in a vacuum. There are references to encrypted chat groups, recruitment tactics, and even past incidents that resemble the methods we saw surrounding Kirk's assassination. The suggestion isn't just that Robinson sympathized with this circle, but that he may have been groomed, coached, and ultimately overshadowed by someone else. Which brings us to the most unsettling part of this update. Multiple reports suggest that the real shooter, the person who fired the fatal shots, was a member of this Antifa-linked subgroup, and if that's true, then Robinson wasn't the mastermind at all. He was a pawn. That theory has now moved from whispers on fringe boards to mainstream chatter within investigative circles online. And as it spreads, one question grows louder: if this subgroup exists, and if the shooter is real, why hasn't law enforcement acknowledged it? So what exactly is giving this Antifa subgroup theory traction? Why are so many people convinced this isn't just internet noise? First, there are the timelines. Multiple eyewitnesses at the event described confusion in those critical first minutes, conflicting accounts about the shooter's height, build, and even clothing. Some swore Robinson didn't match what they saw, and those discrepancies never fully disappeared. Second, there's the matter of digital footprints. Screenshots have surfaced showing usernames tied to Antifa-affiliated spaces referencing Robinson weeks before the attack. In these chats, participants spoke cryptically about a test run and a signal, terms that many now interpret as coded references to what ultimately unfolded. Third, there are the eerie parallels to past incidents. This subgroup, if it truly exists, has allegedly been linked to targeted disruptions and smaller-scale violence across several states. The tactics are the same: isolate a vulnerable recruit, indoctrinate them with ideology, and then step in at the critical moment when action is required. Finally, there's Twiggs. His disappearance has long puzzled investigators and the public alike, but under this theory, his silence makes more sense. If Twiggs knew Robinson wasn't acting alone, if he recognized the hand of a radical network behind it, then his fear wasn't of Robinson, or even the justice system, it was of the people who might come after him next. Taken together, these fragments form a picture that's difficult to ignore. Not a perfect picture, not one tied up with official evidence and press releases, but a picture that explains the inconsistencies, the silence, and the missing pieces far better than the lone wolf narrative ever has. So who are they, this alleged subgroup at the center of the whispers? Unlike Antifa in its broadest sense, which operates loosely and often in protest spaces, this circle is described as much smaller, more insular, and more radical. Think of it less like a movement and more like a cell, a tight network where trust is earned, secrecy is demanded, and loyalty is tested. Reports suggest that it draws in members who already feel alienated, people searching for identity and belonging. Many of those members, according to Chatter Online, are transgender activists who've been radicalized by a belief that mainstream politics has failed them. Within the subgroup, that frustration transforms into action that in their view is justified as resistance. What separates this group from typical Antifa demonstrations isn't ideology, but method. Instead of marching with banners, they operate in shadows, encrypted chats, coded language, and sudden appearances at flashpoint events. Their targets aren't random either. They choose individuals or institutions they believe symbolize oppression, and they plan with precision. That's why some now believe Charlie Kirk was never just a random victim of Robinson's rage. To the subgroup, he would have represented everything they despised, a figurehead of conservative politics, outspoken, unflinching, and highly visible. In their eyes, he wasn't just a man, he was a symbol. And if this theory is true, then Robinson's role begins to look very different. He wasn't a rogue assassin, he was a vessel, a fall guy, a man used to shield the real shooter from the spotlight, ensuring the network behind him could melt back into the shadows while he took the blame. If Robinson wasn't the one who actually pulled the trigger, then who did? Speculation points toward a figure inside this Antifa-linked subgroup, someone far less visible, someone who has avoided the spotlight entirely. The whispers say this person was present the night of the assassination, hidden in plain sight, blending into the chaos while Robinson became the perfect distraction. And here's the chilling part. If the rumors hold any weight, this shooter wasn't a lone wolf. They were embedded within the network, trained in secrecy, and shielded by ideology. Robinson's arrest gave them exactly what they needed: time. Time to vanish, time to relocate, time to prepare for whatever comes next. Eyewitness accounts have been hazy, sometimes conflicting. Some said they saw Robinson fire. Others insist they saw someone else in the crowd, a taller figure, hooded, slipping away in the confusion. Law enforcement has never confirmed this officially, but what they haven't said speaks volumes to those following the case. Online forums have gone further, claiming this individual has already left the state, possibly the country, that the group has connections strong enough to move people across borders without leaving a trace. And if that's true, then the real assassin isn't just in hiding, they're protected. Which raises the question, if the shooter is still at large, what does that mean for the rest of us? Because a person who has already proven capable of striking once and getting away with it might not be finished. To many, the pieces don't just fit, they snap into place. Start with the digital footprint. Investigators, both official and independent, have pored over Discord servers, encrypted chats, and fragments of deleted messages. Within them are references that align almost too neatly with the timeline of Charlie Kirk's assassination. Code words about an event, chatter about removing symbols, and cryptic mentions of our guy in Utah. Then, there's Robinson himself. Remember, this wasn't a man operating in silence. He was active online, engaging in communities where ideology ran hot and unchecked. He wasn't just listening, he was being groomed. His transformation from angry young man into weaponized pawn didn't happen overnight. It happened inside those circles. Neighbors reported unusual visitors to the condo before the assassination. Strange cars, unfamiliar faces, people who came and went at odd hours. Nothing concrete enough to prove conspiracy, but enough to leave residents unsettled. Could those visitors have been handlers, prepping Robinson for the role he'd play? And let's not forget Lance Twiggs. His sudden disappearance, vanishing right after Robinson's surrender, feels less like coincidence and more like consequence. He knew too much. He was close enough to hear the aftermath, maybe even the planning. And his silence, whether voluntary or forced, only strengthens the theory that a larger group was pulling strings behind the scenes. All of it together builds a picture that's hard to dismiss. Robinson wasn't just a lone assassin consumed by hate. He was the surface detail in a much darker painting. The hand we saw, not the hand that held the brush. If there's one name that keeps circling this storm, it's Lance Twiggs. He wasn't just Robinson's partner, he was his closest confidant, the one person who would have known what Robinson was thinking, what he was planning, and what he confessed after the shots were fired. When Robinson's family pushed him to surrender, Twiggs was already under scrutiny, and then, almost overnight, he was gone. His condo in St. George tells the story better than words can. Lights left on, packages piling up, his Infiniti parked with tools tossed inside, as if he left in a rush and never looked back. Neighbors whispering that if he ever returns, it will be in a body bag. That's not the language of rumor, that's the language of fear. Why does Twiggs matter here? Because if this Antifa subgroup exists, Twiggs was close enough to feel its pull. He was in the same spaces online. He was in the condo where visitors came and went. He was there when Robinson confessed. And if the theory holds true, Twiggs wasn't just collateral, he was a liability. That's where the speculation sharpens into something darker. Did Twiggs disappear because he chose to? Or because someone chose for him? If he was silenced, it wasn't random, it was deliberate. It was about control, making sure the one person who could link Robinson directly back to the group would never get the chance to speak. And if he is alive, maybe tucked away by federal agents, maybe hidden by his own family's wealth and connections, the silence still serves the same purpose. He isn't talking, he isn't filling in the blanks, and with every day that passes, his absence becomes the group's greatest weapon. If this theory carries even a shred of truth, then one question towers above all the rest: why the silence? Federal agencies have been quick to label Robinson as the lone actor. But beyond that, nothing? No press briefings addressing the rumors of a wider network, no statements about Twiggs, no confirmation, no denial, just silence. And in the vacuum of silence, suspicion grows. Some argue this is by design, that if there really is an organized cell behind the assassination, exposing it publicly could spark panic, or worse, inspire copycats. Others believe the silence is strategic, a way to protect an ongoing investigation, buying time while evidence is gathered behind closed doors. But then, there's the other possibility, that the silence isn't about investigation or protection, it's about control, information management. Because admitting that a trans-linked Antifa subgroup carried out an assassination on U.S. soil would be more than a scandal, it would be a crisis, one that could inflame political tensions to a breaking point. And the media? They've played their role too. Mainstream outlets have repeated the official story, avoiding deeper questions. It's the independent corners of the internet where these discussions thrive, where theories grow legs. And for many, the absence of serious coverage feels like confirmation that something is being deliberately buried. Whether it's intentional cover-up or careful silence, the effect is the same: the public is left to connect the dots on their own. And what they're finding is far more explosive than anything printed in the headlines. Out in the open, the narrative feels settled. Robinson is the assassin. Case closed. But beyond the headlines, a very different story is spreading, and it's gaining traction. Online forums, independent media, and even casual conversations in towns far removed from Utah all carry the same undertone. People aren't buying the lone gunman story, they're convinced a larger network is in play. They believe Robinson was a pawn, and they see Lance Twiggs' disappearance not as a mystery but as proof. The belief isn't limited to conspiracy corners either. More and more, average citizens, neighbors, co-workers, students are voicing doubts. They look at the silence from authorities and the media blackout and feel as though the truth is being managed, not revealed. And once that seed of doubt is planted, it grows fast. Rallies have been small but passionate, with protesters demanding transparency. Social media hashtags calling for answers trend every few days, each time pulling new people into the conversation. And for many, the lack of response only makes their conviction stronger. Here's the reality: when a story like this fractures into two versions, the official line and the shadow theory, public trust erodes, and once trust is broken, it's almost impossible to repair. That's why this theory matters, not just for what it says about the assassination itself, but for what it reveals about the people watching from the outside. They no longer believe, they suspect, and suspicion, left unchecked, becomes its own kind of truth. So where does that leave us today? Officially, Tyler Robinson sits as the accused assassin of Charlie Kirk. The paperwork says he acted alone. The evidence presented so far keeps the spotlight squarely on him. And yet, weeks after the crime, federal charges still loom in limbo, delayed in ways that don't quite make sense. Lance Twiggs remains missing. His condo untouched, his car unmoved, his silence deafening. Authorities have given no update on his status. Not a word on whether he's in protective custody, in hiding, or something far worse. Each day he stays gone, the questions only multiply. Meanwhile, the chatter online refuses to die down. The alleged Antifa subgroup is still named in forums, whispered about in encrypted channels, and referenced in investigative blogs. Some claim to have identified the shooter. Others say the person has already crossed borders. No one can prove it, but the story grows with every retelling. And this is where the lines blur, between what's proven, what's plausible, and what's whispered. the case stands in a liminal space, caught between the official version and the one so many now believe. For investigators, that's a nightmare. For the public, it's an invitation to keep searching. The truth is simple and terrifying all at once. If the real shooter is still out there, the story isn't over, it's only paused. The official story says this case is over, but the evidence, the whispers, the disappearances, the silence suggests it's anything but. Was Tyler Robinson truly the lone assassin driven only by his own hate? Or was he a pawn carefully positioned to take the fall while a hidden hand pulled the trigger? Was Lance Twiggs simply unlucky, caught in the crossfire of suspicion? Or was his vanishing act the final move in a game meant to bury the truth? If the alleged Antifa-linked subgroup exists, then we may be looking at a crime far more organized, far more dangerous, and far more protected than anyone first imagined. And that means the real story of Charlie Kirk's assassination isn't written in court filings. It's unfolding right now in silence, in secrecy, and in shadows. One day, the truth will come out. It always does. The only question is whether it will be revealed by those in power or uncovered by those who refuse to stop asking questions. And that sits where you come in. If you believe this story deserves more attention, don't let it fade. Share it, talk about it, keep the pressure alive. Subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, and join me as we keep digging into the questions others are too afraid to ask. Because until the whole truth is revealed, this case isn't closed, not even close.